Hello. I am joining you after a break because my kids got out of school and things got crazy over here. And yeah, I've just spent some time being present with them before they go away to camp. And so June has been beautiful, actually, a beautiful time for us to be together and for me to kind of take a step back. But it is June 28th, and I'm back with a big topic. Well, I don't know. It's one of my favorite topics. And something I've weaved into my message and my platforms. And that is these cycles that we all go through. But today I'm going to talk specifically about the menstrual cycle and why we are so emotional during our menstrual cycle. So this is more from a spiritual perspective. Obviously, there are hormones that change around our menstrual cycle. Let's just say you're still in the bleeding phases of your life. And, but even if you're not, this is great knowledge. And it's interesting if we talk about those sort of crone years where some of us might be going through menopause. The reasons, from a spiritual perspective, the reasons why we go through these emotional periods of the month and why they would end, again, from a spiritual perspective, why they would end in those later years, it actually makes sense because the older generations of women are likely not meant to be doing this type of sort of I'm going to get into is like a death and rebirth cycle, right? They're at the end phases of their life. It's like it's a different energy, and they've already been through sort of the shitstorm. They're coming down on the other side and sort of ready to go through another death rebirth, right? The more the physical one, right? But we're not going to talk about the crone years. But I'm glad I weaved that in a little bit. I might come back to it at the end a little bit, but let's just say you are in your menstruating phases of your life, right? And every month around your period, first of all, it is wise and helpful, and I do this, to keep a tracker. I have a P tracker, it's called, the app that I follow, so that I can know when my cycle is. And sorry, my phone is ringing. And be prepared for that. And I have conversations with my partner as well around, look, this is when my cycle is. He might even be tracking it. But we helpful for our partners to track that. And so he knows that like these are times when I'm going into a process, right? So all throughout history, women in the pagan years, at least, and certainly in all of the years that we have been living in community with each other. Now we are in single family homes, which I think is at the detriment of our health and humanity, as we are beings of connectedness and beings of living in community, really. We're not meant to be, we're hardwired for connection, as Brené Brown would say. And so single family homes, we've sort of gotten away from this sort of the way that in which we used to process together during red tent ceremonies, to be specific. But your cycle will fall around the same time every month. You either have 25 days is a pretty short cycle, but 27 or 28 days. But 25 to 28 is usually pretty typical. And during this time, we have an opportunity to process what is coming up. So I am a firm believer that everything happens for a reason. So when my cycle comes every month, whatever's going on in my world that is heightened. So let's say I have a fight with my boyfriend, or a family member, or I'm feeling myself like really impatient with my kids. Whatever's getting amplified, it's like our cycle puts a magnifying glass on what you are meant to be purging, processing, or healing. And it happens for us every month around our cycle. I believe our cycle is meant to have, not just I believe, this is like, a lot of people believe. And was the purpose for these red tent ceremonies, what I was going to say, is women used to do this together, right? There was some physical pain. There's some physical pain involved with some women, right? But women used to conjugate together around the full moon, because the full moon is typical that we have our cycles. Some people are on a new moon cycle, but a full moon actually is a time for purge and is a time for us to release something that is no longer serving us, to release a story, to release a pattern, to release a person from our life, right? And that is the sort of death cycle that we go through every month, right? We bleed and we shed, right? So that is the dying off. The lining, an actual part of us does die off and get released. In the red tents, that would get released to the earth, right? They would bleed right on the earth and allow the blood to regenerate through the earth. And this was all cyclical. So not only was it cyclical, it's ritualistic really as well, right? So with the moon, we would bleed. So that cycle was always the same. So women knew when the full moon was coming. You could literally, so that's how they would track when their menstrual cycle would come. Not only that, but women were living amongst communities, so they were all cycling together. And that is not by mistake either, right? Spirit designed us so amazingly. I recently told my daughter's getting to this age and she's asking about periods, and we had this big talk about it, and I was so happy that I got an opportunity to tell her what a beautiful and precious time it is. And when I told her all the cool things about getting a cycle and how she'll probably cycle with her friends the same time some of her friends do at school, or the ones she spends the most time with, she was blown away by that. She thought that was so cool. Anyway, if you have kids around that age or daughters around that age, like that's just a positive, cool spin. Sort of feels magical, right? On a period thing that society kind of has deemed as this like gross, shameful experience. And I certainly grew up feeling that way. And, I don't want my daughter to have that experience. And now I am like, I think it's one of the most magical experiences and things that women go through. So women would go through this period of time all together. They would go into these tents for those few days, and they would not only purge their physical blood, but they would go into their all their stuff, their emotions. They would cry, and they would maybe even release anger and go through this process. And so nowadays, modern day, what I hear a lot of is, God, it's always around my period. I just say like I can't control myself, or I can't. Well, I just want to offer this like opportunity to be like, well, maybe you're not supposed to. You know what I mean? If we're tracking our cycle every month, it's almost like I feel like, and I've done this in the last few years, where it's like I have permission. Like those 4 days is my permission to rest, because we were supposed to be in receiving mode. We actually receive information from our our higher self and our spirit team, our channels become open, right? So we're supposed to be in restful states. So I take it as an opportunity for rest. I take it as an opportunity to receive. And I take it as an opportunity to allow spirit to show me, to put that magnifying glass on what it is that I'm supposed to be changing, releasing, processing, allowing to die off in my life. And these are obviously not easy things to do. I mean, every month, pretty much, I'm like, oh God, I've got to go through this whole thing. But afterwards, it is very rewarding. If we work with it in this beautiful cyclical way, and the way that I believe spirit intended us to work with it. And so our cycle, like I said, is a physical death and rebirth. It's an emotional death and rebirth. And it's the opportunity for us to put that magnifying glass, like I said, right? So after our cycle comes, we go through an integration period that's also quite slow. And then the rebirth is when we go through an ovulation. Our ovulation is when we are most prosperous, most active, most vibrant, most ready to go. And then we go through another integration, sort of a slower pace. And then we have our death cycle again. And so just so you guys understand how that all works, I just want to make sure I advocate here really strongly that it is no mistake that our hormones change. Now, I am not a scientist or a doctor, and obviously if your hormones are going into something that is bringing you such great depression. Obviously, if you're following me, you know that I'm a huge advocate for nervous system health and trauma work, right? So if you're going into, your hormones are shifting so much, maybe it doesn't even have to do with your hormones, but you're going into such deep depression that it's something that you're in such a downward spiral that it's harmful to yourself or others. Then it's actually hard for you to be able to process or maybe go through the work that you need to go through, because you might even fall into such a victimization that you can't do a proper process. In that case, I would recommend that you get some one-on-one help, either from a coach like me, or maybe you do look at your hormones and make sure everything is, you want it within a certain range, right? And then there's all the root causes for why that would be happening, which is what I advocate for and promote. But let's just say that you are in a healthy, hormone range, or maybe you have autoimmune and you find that you're having really intense flares, right? So your purge process is going to look more like whatever work you're doing. You either need to rest and process out, or it might be a time that you actually... So for me, it was like everything that was building up in my system, when my period would come, it kind of would just come out. And so if you are having a lot of flares, your cycle is a time for you to cry. I would experience insomnia around my cycle. So it's a time where if I do experience insomnia around my cycle, I'll stay up and I'll work with the activation. I don't generally try to take anything during that time. It's a time where you might want to plan, right? Like if you have kids, see if someone can watch your kids during that period. If you have a really intense work environment or job that you go to, I mean, this is going to sound like extreme to some people, but I advocate for you taking your period days off. because this is like a very patriarchal ideology that we have of like push through during your period, or like I saw someone post the other day about how she ran a marathon during her period. Like, I mean, that's fine if you want to do that, but that's actually not what our bodies are intended to be doing during that time, And so I don't want people to shame themselves because they feel like they're too emotional or too tired or too fatigued or flaring up. It's actually your body asking you to do something. And so for you have to figure out what that thing is. If you are someone who pushes through, I don't know, maybe play with something different, right? Or someone who has a ton of energy and is in more of those activated states, and you find that you have some anxiety around things or you can't sit still, maybe it's a time that you go into that. Why do I have to be active so much? Can I just sit and just be with myself for, a few hours or a day or whatever? So just want to make sure I'm on my same train of thought here. So autoimmune and flares around periods. So if you are flaring heavily and you feel like you need even more support, I would call in more support, right? A friend, a husband, a partner. It's not a time to be like, first of all, it is Wonder Woman-y to go through these processes, right? And just, I don't know, I feel like asking for support is so hard for so many women, but it's like we're here to deal with our stuff and to break generational trauma and things and change patterns, especially if we're moms. So, I mean, not even if we're moms, but if we're moms, we see it more, right, in our kids, because our kids start carrying over our own patterns. It's a little bit more visible, right? But call in support, whatever it is that you're working on with your autoimmune, whether it's health, whether it's nervous system, or if it's trauma, then it will be pretty clear what you need to process, right? If you need a coach like me, I would love to help you. Even if you wanted to just make sure you booked around those cycles and you needed support for that. And it's okay to bring in herbs. If, like I said, if you are really like hurting and you are having issues with pain or with dealing with the depression and all of that, maybe bring in some MTHFR, maybe bring in some 5-HTP, which are serotonin supporters. Maybe bring in some herbs like, chamomile is a beautiful one for anxiety. And there was another one I was going to mention. I'll think of it. So all of that is good, to resource if you need to. And then the last point that I want to make is it's no accident that it's women. Women are really doing a lot more, it seems like to me, of generational trauma, repair, work, healing. And women are the ones that go through these like very visible cycles, even though men do have their own cycle, it's a little bit different. And these hormones that are more prevalent with us, this estrogen and all of this and progesterone that help to calm us or help to, can make us more emotional, and how they fluctuate and all of this. Again, it's not on accident. Like, it is there for us to do something with the energy. And so I always want people to like really think of it that way. Your body isn't broken when it's emotional during your period. It's meant to be doing something for you. If those things are so heavy, more intense than another person's, then it might just mean that you have more you've got to get through, right? It also might mean that you need a little bit more support. Like, you have to determine that. But this time is a time to purge. It is a time that we are meant to be looking in the magnifying glass at what our stuff is and what patterns we're meant to be breaking. This is a soulful journey. Our cycles are a soulful journey. They are a journey through with spirit to go into the inner depths of our shadow. You know, our cycles are meant to be doing the shadow, helping to assist do our shadow work with us and for us, right? So I want to advocate us to really shine a light on these processes as beautiful and amazing and intentional, and here to support us and to support our healing in every single way. And again, it's the women who are really breaking these generational trauma things, and men are doing it in another way, right? But in the spiritual perspective, it's like the men are our protectors, right? So they're the ones that are meant to be there supporting us as we go through. It's just like if we were going through labor, our actual birth process. We are going through a death. Our baby's going through a birth in a way, right? We are breaking a cord, so to speak, with our babies, going into another phase, and our babies getting reborn into this dimension, right? And we're going through our own process. And the men are there to support us, to hold us, to nurture us, to all of these things, right? So that's sort of their place. Again, this is from a spiritual perspective. And it's the same way in our period, but on a different level, but it's the same intention, right? The men to support us, help take care of the kids, maybe wake up with the kids the next day. I mean, this just goes back to like our roots of sort of who like how humans and how all animals sort of function in society for the most part, if you think about it, or in the wild. And so, you know, that is sort of the role of the masculine energy. And so, you know, if you don't have a partner, then, you know, find maybe somebody else can help you, a mom, a dad, right? Those crone years, right? Maybe mom comes in to help support now because she's already been through all of her shit. She's now passed it on to you to help take care of all the things she didn't wrap up in all of her death and rebirth cycles of her lifetime, right? So now she's here to support you, or however that might work, and everybody's different, but lean into that, right? And anyway, that's it. That's the topic for today. I am so glad to be back with you, and y'all have a wonderful day. I will see you next time. Bye.